You might want to just say nonsense into the microphone for the next little bit and see if it comes up.
Man, that's our specialty. I'll tell you my thoughts on this current legislative session. That's what we were talking about behind the scenes.
Actually, I'm really more excited to talk about what your role could be in a potential video.
Oh, good. I'd like to be the one that's extricated, if that's possible.
I was actually really hoping you would say that because that would be very awesome.
Okay, you're
I'm
good.
driving the back of the ladder truck. Seinfeld.
No more nonsense.
Anybody
It's up and running.
All right, so we will consider this public hearing issue. Alan, can you give us the background on that, or is it Scott that is going to?
I can go over it very quickly, but I do need to thank Scott and Scott Bennett. Scott Perks has updated us on there's state code that we have to follow when vacating a right of way. And so he's put together ordinance along with Scott in how we do that and follow that formal process, including signs on site and other things that we have to do. But I can give you an update regarding this item. Let me turn this off. So the area we're looking at, sorry, I kind of zoomed in really fast. This is 2500 north as you're exiting the city out towards the railroad tracks and the airport. And as you're on your way out there, there's the old S&S building, which is here. And to the south of that, there's a right of way right here, 2400 north. Now keep in mind, just a little background. This whole area was Logan City, or part of Logan City proper. And then about 10 years ago, North Logan and Logan swapped their boundaries. And so during that time, a lot of these areas became North Logan City, and a lot of the areas to the south became Logan City. This is one of those areas that went under North Logan's jurisdiction. Now, we don't have the background. We don't know why or what happened, but you can see this is 2400 north, and there are buildings right in the right of way. Basically, unless we want to go in and tear down these buildings, which we aren't going to do, this right of way becomes basically null and void, kind of useless, other than kind of a private access to future businesses through here. And so as you look at that, maybe we'll go into maybe there's a sorry. Okay, so this is just an overview, a very quick overview of the area that would be vacated of that 2400 north right of way. As you look at this, because that's the chunk where the buildings are located, and that's what we're looking at. This issue is a little bit farther reaching. Out of fairness to the property owner, we do need to vacate this at some point because it encumbers the land. They can't really sell or do anything with the land because it has this right of way running through it. However, in looking at this, now this is kind of tough because it's a cart and a horse type situation. But let me open this up. So back in the day, in order to correct this, along with a myriad of issues that no one here was involved in, not the landowner, the current landowner, or anyone else were involved in. Stan Checkett's came in, and I think you guys remember this. The Checkett's industrial subdivision came through this area, and they wanted to do a subdivision throughout this area. And so they came to the city in hopes to work with us to correct several issues. One is 400 West has to come through here at some point. That's the master plan alignment as it comes through and part of the subdivision. And so we tried to work through all of these different issues like vacating right of way, adding 400 West. And we did that through the subdivision agreement, which is pretty lengthy for a subdivision agreement. But it goes through and it talks about public utilities, road improvements, and things that North Logan City would provide in hopes that we would buy eventually a portion of the subdivision or a chunk of land for future public works yard. And these are the negotiations we were going through with Stan. Now, Stan came through and he had his concept plan approved, and then he had his development plan and preliminary plat approved by the city council. However, before he signed the development agreement, unfortunately, Stan passed away, and sadly, it was a great agreement, great working with him. He was fantastic bringing these things to the city. But yes, he did pass away, and so it kind of left the development agreement hanging at that period. And so as we're looking at this, one of the items that the city was offering in lieu was the vacation right away on item C. So again, this is item 3. I'm skipping ahead, now bouncing back to item 2, which is the one we're on for the development agreement. And I hope I haven't just confused everyone beyond belief. Hope I open up the right thing. No. Okay, this is the ordinance that they put together. This is the mechanism that we have to go through in order to vacate that right of way. Again, this is one of several items associated with the city providing certain items in that development agreement, and the updated development agreement is what you consider in the next item. But for this, it's just vacating, as we indicated before, that portion of land, keeping in perpetuity the easements that are associated with that. There is a stormwater easement that goes under this property, but that one can remain in perpetuity. It doesn't encumber the land. It doesn't prohibit them from selling the land or doing other things, whereas the right of way does. And so, sorry, that was a very lengthy explanation of this. We do have the owner of the land, Cody Davis, who's here. However, if there's any questions regarding that, you might want to just say nonsense into the microphone for the next little bit and see if it comes up.
Man, that's our specialty. I'll tell you my thoughts on this current legislative session. Okay, is there anything that the council wants to talk about before we go to public hearing?
Potential video.
Okay, then we'll listen to our echoes.
I'm curious about what our master plan looks like on each side of that. So does that one piece in the middle prohibit us from anything future that might need to happen?
So I'll just speak to that just briefly. That 400 West, we've already been in negotiations with them, the north to south road, just right by there. But there's really no circumstance in which we would need to use, or that we would exercise that easement or that right of way where a building exists right now. It's just kind of like a weird, as I understand it, a weird carryover from that becoming North Logan.
Second, a building went in there, it just basically
Invalidates it almost.
invalidates 400 or 2400 north as a viable roadway in the future, is essentially what it did.
We can probably talk about it a little bit more. We'll go to public hearing and then open it up for discussion. So I'll read the rules for public hearing. Before you begin, please state your name for the record. Please speak into the microphone so your comments can be recorded. Please limit your statements to 2 minutes. If you're speaking on behalf of others, you may ask the chairperson for more time. Please phrase your opinions in the form of statements, not questions. A public hearing is your opportunity to express your opinions to the city council. It is not a time to ask questions and expect dialogue between yourself and the council or city staff. Please address your comments to the council, not to the public. The council may ask you questions about your comments in order for them to better understand you. In the future, note that if you have questions or need to discuss an issue, you may meet with the city council members or the appropriate city staff member before the public hearing where dialogue can take place. You may also provide a written statement as your input for a hearing. You may read your entire statement or summarize it with the 2-minute limit. You may provide a copy of the written statement to the city recorder. He will make copies for the city council and the written statement will become a part of the public record. However, the written submitted statement will not be included in the minutes of the meeting. So with that, we will open it up for public hearing. Okay, seeing no comments, we will close the public hearing and open it up for discussion among the council. Any questions for Scott on this? All right, are we ready to make a motion then? You have to answer one of my questions, guys.
Yes. Remember this one for a while back. So I move that we approve vacating the public right of way on, let's see, parcel 0406200093.
You'd probably approve the ordinance vacating the right.
Did I not say ordinance?
No.
Oh.
Okay,
yeah.
motion to vacate the
Abstained by
ordinance
Elvis,
creating
yeah.
a right of way
Thank you.
by Buzzy,
Second.
second by Emily, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes
Emily.
unanimously. Okay, we'll move on to the next item. Consider approving the signing of an updated development agreement for the Checketts Industrial Subdivision. Alan, you've touched on this a little bit, but is there anything else you want to add to that?
Let's see, no, just so you know what the subdivision looks like, though, it basically comes through here, 400 west. The alignment, we do need to pressure, Logan on this, so they're on board, kind of pressing them on 200 west and 400 west. 200 west is already a regionally significant roadway. However, 400 west has been identified by UDOT as the location where the future light would be located. This is a UDOT roadway, everything west of Main Street. And so 400 west is the location for the light. And this alignment comes all the way down. It goes from the fairgrounds in Logan City all the way up to the north end of Smithfield. It's a very long roadway in the future. But yeah, it comes through here. And then the development agreement associated with that specifies all the things that we would do as a city in collaboration with that subdivision. But one thing we do not have is full construction drawings, which is after the development agreement and development plan are approved. We don't have full construction drawings and the associated costs. Neither us nor the developer have those. And those are some things that the developer would need in place before they feel comfortable signing the agreement, stating what they would be waiving, what the city would be providing, those types of things.
So does that mean, like, is it possible that the development agreement would change materially?
It could. What you could say is you could approve it if you don't have to approve anything. But if you're comfortable authorizing the mayor to sign the development agreement without any changes, that would be fine. If there are changes, I'll just bring it back before the city council and the mayor.
So I just need a little bit of history here. So I remember when Stan came in and it was a very generous conversation.
Mhm.
And then just kind of reading through the agreement, I don't see any significant changes to that, to
Just
what
the
he
areas in
brokered with us
gray.
back then a couple of years ago, but they look like it was still kind of along the same lines of what we had negotiated
Yes,
back then, right?
it's very similar, except for a few items in gray, kind of clarifying or adding a little bit more language. This one's basically just saying, see the PUE that you guys just went through. And then just a clarification impact fee waiver. So if we do a waive impact fees as we go through this, that's kind of dependent on the type of business that comes in. And the type of,
Yeah.
for example, like a service station, when they come in, their impact fee for roads can be off the charts, very high, just because of the number of trips that it generates. You probably won't see a service station, so it's a poor example. Different uses though, or a warehousing type thing could be a lot less for those impact fees. So again, back to the developer's concern of, we just need to specify some of those dollar amounts as they come.
So I guess to that question, then is lot 12 still part of the plan that was discussed in those meetings with Stan?
Yes. Well, that's the offer that the city has in association with this development
That's what I was
agreement, is that we would push forward in hopes of acquiring lot 12.
But I thought
Dang.
so, and I apologize, I'm just trying to make sure I've got this straight, but I thought that we had actually negotiated those terms back then
We were starting to negotiate.
and we never
those
got to a
terms.
dollar
Nope.
amount.
Nope,
Okay.
never got to a dollar amount, but we were in earnest, several conversations with Stan, and the real estate agent, representing Stan.
So who's the primary negotiator now that he's passed on?
Cody Davis.
Cody is
who's here.
okay. It's Cody.
Mhm.
Same intent, I take it.
Yeah. well,
Okay.
we have-
Not to put you on the spot, but you know.
No,
so-
we have the same intent. I just need to get some construction thoughts to see if it makes sense to do right now or, you know, a
Okay.
little later or whatever. We don't have any, issues with it other than that.
Okay. Thanks, Cody. I actually excited to see this come back. I didn't know if we would ever revisit this, so
I didn't even know about it.
really. Then you got a call like, hey,
What-
just
Point of
curious.
clarification, he didn't know about it until about a month ago.
Okay, cool. All right, thanks. That answers my questions.
Any other questions from the council?
I personally would feel more comfortable if we waited with the idea. So would I need to put that if I were to make a motion?
You wouldn't need to make a motion. I can just bring it back later once we have the items, the construction drawings.
Okay.
But it's helpful to kind of have these two things tied together so that we know in the
Oh,
future when we talk about it. So I think it was worthwhile to talk about tonight.
okay.
So, okay, so we don't need to even motion to table it. Okay,
No.
so we'll move along from that one. All right, we'll move to item number 4. Consider a city initiated zoning text amendment to modify zoning allowances for small multi-unit storage, large warehouse type storage, and solid waste facilities in certain zones. The proposal also adjusts development standards associated with large warehouse type storage facilities. Take it away, Scott.
Which one do you want me to go into, Scott? Sorry.
Go to the staff report. That'll have the ordinance in there as an exhibit as well. Okay, so this proposal is, it's fairly straightforward. It's a city initiated text amendment to our zoning ordinance to modify a few land use allowances. So land use allowances we're talking about are small multi-unit storage, large warehouse type storage, and solid waste facilities. And in a nutshell, the proposal strikes storage units, small multi-unit storage, and solid waste facilities as a permitted or conditionally permitted use from any zone in the city. And then it makes some changes to the large warehouse type storage where we want to protect our frontages along Main Street and 2500 North. So there's some setback requirements, but also some retail requirements within certain distances of Main to ensure that we maintain retail establishments along those corridors. We talked about this a few times with Planning Commission in work session. There were some varying opinions on this. The proposal is to strike those uses, as we'd mentioned, but other discussions circulated around, maybe we should try to find some locations where it may continue to be appropriate. However, one of the arguments that staff brought to Planning Commission for consideration is the timing. We know we're going to be going through a general plan here in the next year and a half. Going through that process is somewhat lengthy, but it does give us some good vision for the community, both our industrial and commercial areas as well as residential areas. And these areas at the moment don't have a lot of vision in the general plan.
Scott, on that point, just how long does a typical general plan take?
If we were to start today, and if, for example, we took Hyde Park, for example, it took them about 18 months.
Okay,
Cache County just went through one, took them about 2 years.
okay.
So they're lengthy, for sure. Alan, you want to just scroll down a bit on the staff report? So the staff report kind of goes through a few things, looking at the general plan, looking through the economic master plan that was recently adopted this last year. There's various goals in both of those plans. The general plan analysis, there's not a lot that speaks to commercial and industrial. It's very vague. It says we want to have a good, vibrant commercial area that contributes to our tax base, but it doesn't go on to say any standards, doesn't say, the general form or the land use pattern we would like to go for. And it kind of leaves it open-ended. The future land use map just colors one color on those areas. So commercial, manufacturing commercial, but doesn't get into the weeds at all. So there's just a little bit of ambiguity as to what the future looks like for that area. And so as we look at the trajectory of land uses and the pattern that is established from one use to the next, those uses that we just had mentioned are concerning from the point of if we let too many of those in, it's hard to change the trajectory of the urban pattern that goes forward. So looking at this, the idea with this proposal is that we push pause on those uses, at least until the general plan has run its course. We get the feedback from the public. We have a better vision for those areas. And then if it makes sense to put them back in and we know location wise where it may make more sense, then we can go through a process to add them back into the land use code with more specificity. But for now, this proposal is basically a pause button on those uses with the intent that we would get into some more of those details to the general plan. Do you guys have any questions on the crux of the proposal? What's in the red line?
I just had one question about, I know that the public hearing was held in planning commission.
Correct.
We did speak with Mr. Bybee. Were there any other comments besides those developers?
From the public, no. So those
Okay.
developers who had a past storage project in the city did have an opinion. But from the rest of the public, we didn't have a showing.
Okay. And then the other question I had, and then I'll open it up a little bit more, but on discussing frontage on Main Street, I know that in the past, we discussed doing something like that, having different standards. I think it was around when Nelson Bourne was on the planning commission before your time, Scott, but where do those ordinances stand currently?
As far as the allowances,
Mhm.
right now, small multi-unit storage is a conditional use in both our general commercial and our manufacturing commercial zones, which means anywhere on those corridors, you can put those uses. There is a setback, however, so they can't put them right up next to Main Street and 2500 North. That's the one constraint that we do have. Other than that, it is a conditional use, and we would have to approve them if they come through with a proposal where we can mitigate the reasonable anticipated impacts through conditions.
Okay.
The solid waste facility, same story, conditional use, and then large warehouse style is a conditional use in most zones except for the M2 where it's conditionally permitted. The opposite. So general commercial and manufacturing commercial, it's conditionally permitted, but it's permitted in M2. The proposal would change it to be conditionally permitted everywhere in those zones.
And just to give us a timeline, how long have you been working on this with the planning commission?
We started talking mid-November on this topic. We had, several work sessions, kind of talked about, appropriateness. And as you can see in the staff report, we do have a little bit of a summary of the planning commissioner's comments where they kind of cited on the argument. The planning commission ultimately had a negative recommendation. It was a split vote 4-1. And so it wasn't a slam dunk proposal by any means. However, we wanted to make sure that this was at least brought before the council for their consideration, regardless of the recommendation. So staff does have a positive recommendation. Planning commission differs in their opinions on this.
Okay. All right, council, what questions do you guys have?
Can you pull up the zoning overlay on the GIS real quick?
Yes.
So can you just visually walk us through this, Scott? So obviously red is our commercial. We're saying that's where these changes, talk us through what happens in industrial zoning with
Yep.
this.
So everything in the dark red where the cursor is, that's our general commercial. That's on Main Street, and then a little bit on 2500 North. Everything in gray on the west side of town, that's our manufacturing commercial, light manufacturing commercial. And so in both of those zones, small multi-unit storage is a conditional use. So it's permitted in those areas conditionally, but there is a small setback from Main Street and 2500 that would have to be maintained. The large warehousing is also conditionally permitted in those areas, and solid waste facilities is conditionally permitted in those areas. So those are uses that when we looked at those uses, we wondered, is this an appropriate use along our main streets, our primary commercial corridors? And without going through, a full community visioning process, I think it's reasonable to say that we don't think they should be on those corridors. But then the question is there a place where they could be permitted, yes or no? And that's where it becomes ambiguous. What are the measurement criteria? What are the variables we're trying to analyze? And that's where we just don't have a lot of guidance. So this proposal would say, until we have that guidance, we would strike it from the code.
Okay, and I guess I just didn't realize that we were yanking it from every zone. I didn't realize that in the original language. I mean, I see why, because we do have that mixed industrial right on the frontage.
Right on.
Part of me wonders, why don't we, would it be smarter to keep that zone with, and then consider rezoning along the frontage, but then that's hard because those are all the same.
Yeah.
All right, I'm just thinking through it.
Yeah, another thing that staff brought to the attention of the planning commission as we were looking at this from a higher level perspective is just the nature of our community being landlocked on all sides. We are in fact an infill community at this point. We don't get to grow like Houston endlessly annexing and chewing up vacant land. So we do need to be very selective about our land use decisions, just so that we make sure that whatever is implemented isn't going to be a problem for the next 100 years before that use may change. So as we're looking at the area, especially on Main Street and west of Main Street, this is a primary economic hub for the city, and we want to make sure that we set the right trajectory. And until we have a good idea from a publicly vetted, vision, it's hard to say what that should be. And that's where the proposal kind of came to life, was let's let the general plan tell us where, and let's pull some of these troublesome uses out of the code for now. Always put them back in at some point in the future if you see that there's a need, the community wants it, and there's an area that's appropriate for it. But right now it's kind of carte blanche.
Another thing that I would mention is that I know that, I was on the planning commission for almost 3 years before being on the council. And I think that this area, especially west of Main Street, is changing pretty quickly, especially given the emphasis that that is being placed on a Main Street study. I think that west of Main Street isn't always going to be kind of just the forgotten land. I think that's going to be a little bit different going further. So
We do have some important corridors within that area, second west and fourth west, which we kind of just looked at on the south side of 2500. Those will be interconnected regionally. We'll have a lot more traffic going through there, and that will open up opportunities for maybe some more vibrant land uses. So there's that aspect. Now, obviously, we had a split vote at the planning commission, and there were some emotions in this. We did have a couple of projects, storage projects that had actually gone over a year, which means that they had expired in their conditional use. So the city said, let's take a look at this. Do we want to continue to have this use going forward? And state code allows us to take a 6-month pause and talk about these things as a legislative proposal. And if we want to make a change, we can, and we don't have to accept an application going forward. So there was an opportunity for the city to look at this and say, do we want this going forward? Or do we want to wait until the general plan gives us more direction before we re-entertain such a land use? So,
when does that 6-month period expire?
so we started in November.
So it's May sometime?
May.
Okay.
What about, were there, and I'm sure there were, Scott, but were there alternatives to just a straight out, removal of this option? I'm just looking at this. It seems like there still might be opportunities rather than just shut it down.
Yeah, there's always the opportunity to have an alternative. The initial proposal was just simple in the sense of let's wait till the general plan tells us what to do. So that's how it's drafted now, but we certainly could go back and say where is appropriate. The hard thing though is, let's say that we chose a spot down in the corner of that green square, the southwest corner. If we were to say, well, that's an appropriate location and maybe 1 or 2 other areas, it's hard to zone for that unless we were to create a zoning classification and then initiate a city initiated zoning change to those properties. And I don't know that those property owners would be too happy about being zoned only for storage. So it gets a bit tricky making super surgical changes like that. If we pull it out of the zone, it then affects everybody.
One thing that I want to avoid is doing a general plan guess before our general plan too. Like that makes me a little bit nervous. With all due respect, I'd love to hear your perspective on, what your vision is, but I don't want to leave that to one person. I know that's something that the planning
Yeah.
commission discussed doing, is having Scott make proposals about potentially where these storage units may work, but
Yeah.
I just think it's problematic if we're saying, staff, what's your best guess as to what this looks like? And especially if we have to commit as far as zoning goes.
Yeah, and that was one thing I'd mentioned to the planning commission. If we got direction from the city council to go ahead and do a more specific analysis and say answer that question of where do we think at the moment they may be appropriate. It's hard to do an analysis without any metrics to measure off of. And that's where we want the public input to say, we value certain variables like distance off main or visibility or whatever we want to come up with to then say, okay, these are the important aspects, and here's how we're going to measure the parcels that are vacant using these metrics to then come up with, suitable areas. So it's a challenge. We could say, well, what based on market demand and, what is the most suitable location given maybe a developer is looking at today's conditions and trying to make a project profitable. That's a different, like a highest and best use analysis under today's circumstances. But from a planning perspective, we want to look at this from a longer term vision. And I guess that's where maybe I have more eyes for the distant future. At least I hope I do. And so the proposal is to say, let's get a better vision, and that's what it tries to achieve. But back to your question, Buzzy, yeah, we could do that. We could have some alternatives if we wanted to take the time to kind of guess is what kind of would be
Yeah,
at the
confidence
moment.
would be low, it sounds like.
Yeah.
That's helpful, thanks.
Well, and I have seen, I mean, there's some storage units that I'm going, oh, that's not what I'd want to drive by every day. But I have seen some that their design standards made it to where it was like, that's actually pretty attractive.
There's some
for-
classy ones out there.
There's some pretty,
Yeah.
yeah, so or maybe it's the design standards. But I do think it's great if we can take until May and really discuss this. So we're also not holding the developer, waiting for 2 more years. So,
Sure.
I'm
One more
Oh, I am.
One more
talking
point of
timely.
consideration that just kind of popped into mind as we're talking about this. If you scroll in more on 2500 North there, Alan. Our entrance corridor begins just east of the tracks. If you look at that parcel just to the southwest of your cursor in Logan City boundaries, that's actually planned storage unit development. And so we know 2500 North is an important entrance corridor, kind of sets the stage for the rest of our community. And we've already got a couple of storage projects on 2500, and it just isn't quite setting the vibe that I think anyone envisions, even though we haven't gone through a formal visioning process. I don't think if you ask anybody, how do you want your primary entrance in your community to look? Well, it's loaded up with less vibrant land uses such as storage and large warehousing and, industrial type uses.
Yeah, and I think that to Joni's point, my view of this is pause. It is not an all-out ban to say, look, we'll never consider this, because I think you're right, Joni. There are ways to do storage that isn't unsightly and doesn't impact the adjacent landowners. But I think that that's the point of this body, is to have long-term visioning. And I think as you look at this and you realize how little commercial land that we have in our city, and that we can't just annex more in because we're kind of boxed in by Logan City, the airport, and then Hyde Park. That really impacts my view of this, that inaction here isn't neutral. That inaction means that we're approving uses that maybe we won't like in a short period of time, and that really changes the direction of North Logan. So that's, I just tend to favor saying, let's just put a pause on there so that we have as blank of a slate as we can for the general plan, and then revisit this and say, what kind of storage units would we allow, and how, and what kind of design standards do we attach to that? But I just see the merit in saying, for now, let's put a pause on this.
And that for now is estimated to be about 2 years.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
And another point of consideration, and to the mayor's point, we are landlocked, we're a smaller community. If you actually measure, north to south, we're 2 miles across and 4 miles wide. It takes just a couple minutes to get across town. So as you look at the land use table, I'm starting to wonder how many uses do we want to have within walking distance, and how many uses do we want to have within a reasonable drive. And a storage unit, for example, is a seasonal thing. At most, people go once or twice, every quarter. And usually you don't need to go walking to it. So when we're talking about, well, what types of uses do we want within close proximity? We want to have retail, we want to have food and beverage, we want to have grocery, we want to have professional services, healthcare. When we kind of start talking about, future uses, what do we want to have close by versus what do we want to have regionally? And I think regionally, these uses are maybe something that we are okay to go a little bit further to get to. That was another point of consideration, I think worth thinking about.
Emily, I haven't heard from you.
I think this is a great idea. I think pausing it, letting us come back to it later, I think is the smartest decision. I think it's more thoughtful. I'm sorry, I don't have anything new to add to the conversation, so.
I would love a survey to go out and get really input from people that live here and who have lived here for a long time, to say, what would you see as being important? I'd also like to know what, like, height restriction, and I'll meet with you, but you're right next to the airport. So what are some fantastic things that we see around airports, it might be a benefit, especially on that's our entrance corridor. So
Mhm.
And Johnny, I think that's a good point, and that's what general plan does. And so this is just saying, do we, in advance of that general plan, remove these uses, or do we just kind of roll the dice? Because if there were storage units that came in, we'd be obligated to approve them in those zones, right?
Yeah, I mean, a conditional use it's a by right use with conditions that can mitigate some reasonably anticipated impacts to the neighbors is all. So yeah, it's hard to say no to.
So that's the last question I have on this.
Yeah.
So if we approve this and then let's say something in the blue, maybe we have a request from somebody that's coming in to buy a big piece of land there. They want to subdivide, they want to put in storage units that aren't along, that are 700 feet, 800 feet off the frontages of what we're concerned about. Do we have any options legislatively at that point, considering we've striked these from the zones?
Absolutely. You are the legislative body for the city. And so if there's a proposal that is something you see provides a lot of benefit to the community and you want to open up an allowance for that to occur, we can find a way to legislatively allow it to go through. But it gives you that leverage and that discretion at that point to negotiate. Is this a good idea? Is this something we want? And then kind of puts a little bit more power in your hands when and if that request were to come to you.
So as I understand it, the other way around is that if we do nothing today, we don't have
yeah.
discretion.
Correct.
Because that's
This reminds me of
really,
the dog, you remember this, Brad, the dog house on 1600, our hands were tied.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really great question, Buzzy. That gives me a lot of comfort to say, if we had someone come in and it was just a really great thing for North Logan, that we'd be able to be flexible with this.
It's akin to a rezone. Somebody has to ask for a legislative act to rezone property and we are not bound to say yes. We're not obligated to say yes.
That's what I'm trying to grasp is it's technically wouldn't be a rezone because we wouldn't have it allowed in any zones.
Correct.
So what's our recourse to allow it? What's the path to approving something like that legislatively if it comes to us?
So we could create a unique zoning classification and we
Zoning
could
zone.
apply it to the property specifically. Or we could add it back into the classification, or we could have a development agreement for like a PRUD, like a planned residential unit or like a master plan type of a development where we don't have to allow it except for through a legislative action. It's almost like a mixed use, like our mixed use zone. It basically says, bring us a proposal, whatever it may be. There's no cap on density. There's no, cap on certain things, but it will be approved or disapproved through the city council. You have that discretion before we allow it to go through. So it does give you that ability.
I do want to mention that I have taken some time to look at the available storage unit facilities that are here in North Logan, and there is more than adequate storage for the current needs. I talked to a couple of the people who run them just on the phone and asked like what their storage rental rates were, percentage wise, just to kind of give me an estimate. And I feel like we have more than enough for what our needs are right now. And I think that this is a great moment because I do feel like storage units come in and then more storage units get put around them. That's just my feeling. Nobody looks at a storage unit facility and is like, you know what, I want to put a Chili's in front of that. Like, so we could have it 600 feet back, but I feel like nobody's putting
A target.
a
he
target.
just hasn't seen the nicer ones out there.
Okay,
We'll
I
have to
mean,
give you some pictures
they'd
of
have to,
some-
and I'm
That's
not
right
saying that
next
we
to
couldn't,
Target.
but I am saying that the storage units that we have are maybe not the most business attractive. Is that a way to put it?
That's fair.
They're not bad, but heck, one of them's 2 streets away from my house, and I have to admit, it doesn't really feel like it fits in. I'll just say it right now, that was a weird decision. And I don't know who was,
We're here.
okay, city council of the past, what were you thinking? I don't know.
It was the county, actually.
Okay,
Just to
well,
clarify that.
good. Let's get after the county more. Just kidding. I just feel like this is a great moment to take a good pause while we're doing master planning. So,
Okay. And Roger, I'm gonna put you on the spot. I want to hear
I'd like
your,
to make a motion that we approve the change in striking those 3, putting a pause on solid waste.
all right, Roger has made a motion that we issue a city initiated zoning text amendment to modify zoning allowances for the 3 listed uses.
Approval of the
motion-
ordinance, right? That's what we're saying.
Yeah. Motion by
second.
Roger, second by Joni. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously.
Thanks, you guys.
Joan.
That was Joni. I appreciate your discussion on this, and I know, I want to also acknowledge that I know everyone's been really thoughtful about this and reached out specifically to the planning commission. I just want that to be on the record that this has been a pretty extensive dialogue, that we're not taking this lightly. So, all right, we'll move on to item number 5, consider approving the municipal wastewater planning program annual report. Can we get an acronym there? MWPPAR.
Yes. So basically, this is just annually, we have to submit a report to the state that shows that we are continuing our sewer maintenance program. It just goes over, really just a quick run through. It just kind of talks about our revenues, if we're charging enough on rates. We recently were applying for that DEQ loan, so our rates are perfect. We started going, and then it just asks like cleaning schedules, how often we inspect and everything like that. So it's a very basic agreement or, paper. We do it every year. It just has to have council approval in order for us to submit it back to the state.
All right. Are there any questions for Jordan? Roger, do you have any comments on this?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the municipal wastewater planning program annual report.
Okay, motion by
Second.
Roger, second by, I'm gonna give it to Buzzy.
I knew.
All in
I knew Lex
favor?
better. I mean,
Aye.
We knew that.
All in
Aye.
favor?
Sorry, I.
Any opposed?
I was
Okay,
busy
that
keep
motion
buzzing
passes
you, but you said
unanimously.
it.
Thanks, Jordan. All right, we'll move on to the city council work session items, starting with number 6, a discussion regarding a draft franchise agreement with a communication company. Alan, you want to give us the background on
Yeah, I
this?
can just go over this very quickly because it's a discussion item. I just want to introduce this to the city council. So, the city, basically does what's called franchise agreements with private entities, private utility companies. And so if you look at it, there's obviously electricity, gas, cable and communication, are kind of the 3 biggies that come through the city. And what they do is they sign agreements with the city to use our rights of way. So our roads essentially, to install, their lines, whether it's electrical line, whatever it may be. And in those agreements, we specify how this is to be done. So our old agreements were about 30 years old and they're all expiring, or the vast majority. We signed one last year, 2 years ago with Rocky Mountain Power. It took about 6 months to get through that process. And it was a good agreement at the beginning. We worked, we kind of arm wrestled back and forth, but what we want to do is take a really old, kind of outdated agreement, when basically we probably had several dirt roads throughout the city when that agreement came through, and just unimproved roads and not a lot of utilities in the roads. But the main reason when you have these come through is you look at them and you say, hey, we've got a lot of utilities coming in these areas. What do we do to mitigate any impacts? So if they are coming in, what standards do they have? How do they go about our process? And Jordan's gone through, he's updated our entire encroachment permit process. So if someone comes in to install anything in our rights of way, this is the process they go through. If they want to cut the oil, it's a fancy way of saying put a hole in the asphalt in the road. What are the standards that they have to abide by? And so this goes through, and the intent is to outline that. It also goes through and it specifies things that might be unsightly. So how a substation for like a gas utility, you probably haven't noticed those because the one that went in on the university, they put a masonry wall around it. That was right after we had put that ordinance into effect. And so luckily they came in, they put a masonry wall around it. You can't see it now. It was fantastic to be able to do that. And it was a win-win. The contractor was fine doing that. And so looking at this, there's a lot of utility companies coming in right now, either renewing or new companies. I mean, you'll have fiber companies. We probably have 5 to 10 fiber companies coming in and asking to sign franchise agreements. Now, I need to clarify, though, this is not going into business with a particular fiber provider that would go out through the entire city. This just specifies that they can come in and where they would like to install certain sections of fiber, which we've got along Main Street, going up 2500, up 18th North. We have fiber throughout the city, mainly on the west side of the city. But if they did want to come in and they start installing it, they have to go through a lengthy process with each one of these installations. So they abide by everything that we have. The other reason we do that is because if they come in and install lines, which happened in the past, which is great, and we don't know that they're located there, or they're not at a certain depth, they're not buried below 32 inches in the ground, which is very common. What this does in the new agreement, it says if anyone hits them at that point, it's all on them. Like if they did not bury them at the correct depth or locate them in the right location, and someone hits them, then it's on them. The reason we put that in there is because if we hit a fiber line, which we have done in the past, it is extremely expensive. You can't just go in and use some electrical tape to tape it back together, or a wire nut.
But have you tried?
We did, yes,
Okay.
unsuccessfully. But you have to pull the whole length again and reattach it along a certain connector of that. And so we just want to make it very specific. So it provides more clarity to both ends in an agreement. What we're providing, what we expect, and what the company can expect from the city when they come in to install those lines. So this is probably at about an 80% contract where we have it right now. We still need to work out some details. We'll send it to a couple of the entities that are coming in to apply for that. And these are for small sections in the city, mainly on 2500 North on the west side is where we're looking at this one. But we'll bring it back before the city council in a final format. I just want to introduce it to you so you know what a franchise agreement is. If people bring them up, if they're coming in and talking about it, you'll have several requests for fiber. But there's different levels of fiber. One, this is a franchise agreement. Another level would be a franchise agreement where they come in as a quasi partnership with the city. They install fiber throughout the entire city to go to every residential area and commercial. And we allow them to do that, and sort of you scale down all the requirements for them putting things in to the city.
So is it typical for the city to provide the franchise agreement? Like, is that typical that the city does, not the franchise, the company itself?
Yes and no. When we tried to combine Rocky Mountain Power with ours when they came in, and like we said, it was a long negotiation associated with that. Typically, if a contractor comes in and provides their franchise agreement, their template, it does not provide a lot of protection for the city. Which is where the city's been left high and dry in the past. And so we basically developed a template. Seth helped us out with that several years ago. We worked with other adjacent communities like Nibley, who's going through the same process, same timelines. And we developed our last franchise agreement by going through that lengthy process. So now we at least have a template.
So
we
would
can
this
go off.
kind of just be the starting point, but then we'd likely enter into negotiations with a company in the event that we decide to?
Yes, this would be a starting point for more just like a private company that comes in and installs small segments throughout the city.
Okay,
This wouldn't be a full-blown install throughout the entire city agreement.
Okay.
That's the way it's tailored right now.
okay,
It would be too expensive for the entity because they'd have to come in and reapply every time they have to do any installation.
okay.
Um,
So I'm just trying to picture if there were a fiber company who said, look, we'll give you the moon. Where's your franchise agreement? Would this be the one that we'd hand them?
No,
It'd
that's
be a
when
different
we'd
one.
sit down with them and get that from the adjacent community and say, how did you go about this? Can we look through all the details? And then
Okay.
We'd set it up that way. That's a
Are you talking
perfect
like
question.
a fiber company that wanted to provide service to?
Like a
residents?
Provo.
Yeah, I'm just trying to wrap my head
Yeah.
around what we're actually considering, and but this is
Yeah.
for just more very specific areas.
Segments of the city,
Okay,
not citywide.
so not citywide. Okay. Any other questions from anyone else? I think especially if you've gotten legal review of this and it looks like staff's provided comments, like sounds great to me.
Do you think it'll be ready for next meeting
It
or a
could
couple
be.
months still? Okay.
Next meeting or the meeting after, and what we'll do is we'll probably send it out in a draft format to the company out of fairness, so they have a chance to come back with their requests at that point.
Okay. All right, then we will move on to fiscal year 2024 budget proposal from Parks. Ryan, good to see you.
Okay, so the top items really haven't changed all that much. Everything's stayed fairly similar to the years before. The only thing that has changed is we got a bit more of the RAPS tax. So it's gone back down to the normal 149 or 142, 140. As you go down, my budget has pretty much stayed the exact same from years previous. I feel like we're doing pretty well getting the things that we need. The one thing at the very end that kind of makes the budget look a little bit different is we're asking for a little bit of extra money to be set aside year to year so we can replace some of our older vehicles. We inherited a lot of old fire trucks and stuff like that. With the new fire agreement, we haven't been receiving those, so that's where our large majority of change is for the fiscal year. Any questions on the parks?
While we have you here, I know we talked just recently about the new, I guess, is it a storage, like a shed?
Mhm.
What's kind of the timeline on that?
So we've got the company, they're ready to go. They're just waiting for the spring to get here and then they can start working on it. Yeah, we've got it scheduled for as soon as possible. They would like to get any of it done.
So they'll
Okay.
break ground, what, July 1st?
Right, it should be, yeah.
There's a little
I-
smoke.
The plower in
Too
me
soon.
really doesn't want July 1st.
Sorry, I just,
So just to clarify that a little bit more, it's all very clear in Ryan's head and thanks to him for pushing these items through. One is the shed that Ryan has coordinated, which will work out well. He's had to meet with several entities to do that, but that's a RAPS project. So the RAPS will be funding that or a large portion of it. The other one was the one that he's working on up here on Elk Ridge East. And you saw that kind of multifaceted playground here for multiple different levels of play. Along with a lot of the 9 Square and Gaga Ball and Pavilion. And the other improvement is over here at the CRC. Ryan put in the pickleball courts, which you guys have used for a day. But
Then
then
the snow came.
before the snow came, people are really dying to get out there. I've heard from several people saying that. But then there's another pavilion that would be installed down here.
Sorry.
In addition to the restroom. But all of these projects Ryan's working with, we have to be careful because we have a limited amount of impact fee, but these are impact fee projects that have all been part of our capital improvement plan. And then they're all RAPS projects in addition to that. So these are the capital improvement projects associated with RAPS.
So question, Ryan, I don't know if this is parks or recreation, but are we forecasting what we might collect on revenue for the pickleball?
Yeah,
Work for
right
that
now
budget.
we have been working together, Jesse and I and Mary. We've been going through a whole process to figure out how much we can charge, what we should do for it. We would like to make a couple courts always open
Yeah.
for nothing, but yeah, we have been going through to get some kind of a scheduling and a fee associated with a bunch of the courts.
So any potential revenue is
Yeah.
probably not reflected here yet, right?
Not yet,
Okay.
no.
That's
Okay.
helpful.
Another key aspect of that, what these guys have brought up, sorry, we've talked to several other cities and trying to put together potential policies, which we might have to modify over time. And this is a learning experience for us. Generally what you see though, parks, as far as fees and reservation fees, they generate a small amount. In comparison to providing a facility where recreation can come in, which can generate a little bit more money. What I mean by that is recreation fees for using the facility, tournaments, which these guys have all started coordinating, along with basically, I'm trying to think of something else that it brings in. Regardless, that's where you see more revenue coming is on the recreation side from these facilities.
Are we gonna charge fees for fundraising tournaments?
I would say, yeah, I think we'll have fundraising tournaments. I know the library here is planning on a fundraising tournament early in the spring, as soon as we can get out there. So July 1.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna joke. I mean, on the July 4th holiday.
we'll call it
catch
the
up with
4th
you.
of July.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions about the budget specifically?
This isn't about the budget, but I'm really excited about the projects you guys have coming up.
Yeah,
Ryan.
so am I. I'm ready for the snow to stop and get out there on the grass again, so.
Such so fun.
I will put in one kudos for Roger on this item. We'll go over three budgets here tonight. Parks budget, their demand on the general fund. You look down here, it's around 728. That's actually inflated because it'll probably come down a little bit and looking through a few of these numbers. That's the fourth largest. We have the largest amount of parkland in the valley. We have the fourth largest budget.
Oh, it's gone.
So keep those things in mind.
Are we going to have the largest pool?
The largest what?
I
Potentially.
think that would go in a different part of
Potentially.
that.
Basically, our budget is smaller than a city with 1/6 the amount of parkland that we have.
So I should have put the numbers up a little bit.
Good job,
Yes.
Ryan.
Good job, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
Should always start your presentation with what you're number one in
Yeah,
and what
For
you're
sure.
number four in as well. We want both of those numbers, 1 and 4.
yep. Start bragging. You can't always rely on Alan.
Yeah.
Alan does it so well, though. I-
I take credit for it.
Yeah.
So keep working hard, Ryan.
Okay. Thank you.
Stay, 'cause I think cemetery's next.
Okay.
Hope.
Yep, we'll move on to cemetery.
Let's see if this is.
So I'll just start with the cemetery. We're really excited. We've been meeting with Cash Highline and Circle B Irrigation. And we have plans in place and they're the same. As soon as the ground can be broken, we're planning on putting in a secondary system up to the cemetery. The one thing we're really excited about that, if you notice, our water and sewer last year was about $42,000. It's a lot of water that we put up there. We are hoping that that goes to nothing, right? To be on secondary water. So the canal project is going to be about $120,000. So we're gonna see in 3 years, we're gonna have that all paid back.
That's amazing. Not to mention just reducing the demand on our culinary water resources.
Exactly. So we were kind of looking at it in between our coming over and attaching at Meadowview and going up here, we're gonna be saving about 10 million gallons of water
Wow.
a year just
Dang.
from those
That's awesome.
projects. So
And
We're
what is
really
our
excited.
cemetery number 1 in?
everything.
Okay.
That's the most beautiful cemetery ever.
I bet we have.
Alan literally raised his hand. He has something to say. Alan?
We do have several other cities who have started their cemetery in the past several years. And when they do, they reach out to us. So they'll reach out to North Logan and say, how did you do this? Why did you do this? And we did the exact same thing when we started our cemetery, and hats off to the cemetery committee, which had started this process 15 years before I started working here. They had done the legwork. They reached out. And when I started here, it was just reach out to every other city. And we said, if you could start over today, what would you do? And that's how we started our cemetery. And that's how we developed the policies for the cemetery. So when new cemeteries are coming on board, I've had 2 from Weber County alone reach out, their new cemeteries, and they said, how did you do it? What did you do? And I'm sure they've improved on it at that point. So hats off to
Yeah.
Ryan for doing.
Cemetery.
That's my favorite area. I love the cemetery.
Right,
So.
so I kind of-
After he gets the water installed, the secondary water, just a point of clarification too, the cemetery would be revenue neutral. It won't have a demand on the general fund at all.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's
How much
amazing.
water does that save?
So up here, I think it was close to 4 or 5 million gallons of water was what we were looking at saving. Now, the last couple of years have been really hot and dry, and we did plant close to 50 trees. So I have had to put a little bit of extra water just to make sure that we were keeping those alive, especially with the hot, but that's still, I mean, we've got about 10 acres worth of turf we're taking care of up there, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah. Any other questions, I guess?
Awesome. Perfect. Thanks.
great.
So-
All right, we'll move on to rec. Jesse, you're up. You got to provide your own.
Alan, are we the?
We
biggest
rely
rec-
on you.
Are we the biggest rec department in the valley yet? Did we get there?
Yeah, do you want to give your stats or do you want to let Alan?
That was for Roger.
We're up 439% in basketball since I started. No. It's in the narrative, which I barely got done today. Yeah, this is fun. Rec is awesome. A lot of things that really drive us is just the people. It's good seeing most of you guys on Saturday. at the basketball games. That was a lot of fun. And we always try to make participants not have excuses to do things. So like for our tennis, we have rackets for them if they need them, stuff like that we put together. And a lot of those we get from our sponsors. We've had a few drop out this year just because they couldn't afford it, even though it's not very much, but and we've had a few new ones come this year, so it's been really good. Our budget hasn't really increased or decreased a whole lot. I usually like to go low on our revenue, but I do because we estimated what 195 or 215. Thanks for that.
No, that's your actuals. So you underestimated what you were going to bring in, Jess, by
Oh, that's
20,000.
where I'm at right now. Oh, geez. I thought it was less. I was worried. Real briefly, I want to touch on the RSL fees or the HSC fees. We do keep track of everything we bring in. We just don't put it here in the budget just because it kind of skews everything because it's coming in and coming out. So it's kind of how that works. Well, let's see. So we really decreased a lot we weren't sure how the HSC was going to work with the budget. So we did budget a little bit for it and down at the bottom there, and then a majority of the 10,000, the actual building will be refunded to us. It's just some things, if they're slow on getting a check, it like shuts down the whole cities or some stuff. So we try to do that. What else? There's not a whole lot. We do plan on adding tons of stuff like pickleball. Our first pickleball tournament is online. It's the library one. Okay, it's the libraries. But that registration is going on now. We're gonna get pickleball leagues, tennis, or pickleball lessons, a whole bunch of fun stuff.
And that was something that a lot of people mentioned in the survey was just a desire for pickleball, everything.
Oh yeah, we're gonna hit it hard. Yeah, so I don't really have a whole lot. We're pretty much flat, just pretty much the same across the board. A few increases, like I said, just because prices have gone up, but for the most part, we're cruising.
What are your sponsorship fees? What do you charge for those?
So we have different packages. The main ones are Grand Slam, which has like a logo on their soccer jersey, basketball jerseys, baseball jersey. And we have some stuff online for them. That one runs, if it's the first time, it's $900, and the second, and a renewal $750. It's not very expensive, but all that money, when we talk to them, it goes back to the kids. So we give them equipment. So soccer season coming up, I ordered 1,270 soccer balls that we have to blow up. Thanks to Ryan. He helps us out. All that money's coming from our sponsors, and we really want them to play at home. That's how the kids are gonna get better. That's how relationships are gonna build. How you bring community together is to start at home.
So Jesse, looking at this, were we almost 3% less in general funds last year? Or is that proposed now? What am I seeing there?
Yeah, what he's proposed would be a negative 2.9% decrease in the demand on the general fund.
That's what I meant.
So
Yeah, so we would,
Yeah,
we're trending a good direction there.
That's great.
It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
And I will point it out now, just because you opened up Pandora's box, and I am just gonna comment on this, and because of what Jesse's done. That $272,000 demand on the general fund is 1/10 the second place recreation department in the valley. So not only is Jesse double the amount of recreation of the second highest participation rate in the valley, he does it at 1/10 the cost.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely incredible. What I'm
That is
saying is
amazing.
that the second place, their recreation department costs $2 million a year.
Wow.
And at 1/2 the amount of recreation Jesse runs.
Thank you, Jesse.
It's a good time.
So Jesse, it seems like just anecdotally from basketball that we have a lot of participation from other cities. Is that right? Like we have a lot more Logan and I think
Yeah,
what other,
so yeah, North Logan Hyde Park. I do get a random Preston kid and some Tremont. But definitely. So I usually in my narrative, I usually put that in there, what percentage is North Logan and Hyde Park, but I was working on it and my formulas weren't right, but I'll get that updated when you guys.
What would you guess?
From what I saw, majority was North Logan.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're at 60%.
Okay.
And then Hyde Park was, I don't know, I think the outside towns other than Hyde Park was like 25%.
Okay.
That's
So,
a good, that's a pretty high number.
yeah, it's fun.
That's great.
Like it. Way to go.
We love seeing the reduction. That's amazing, especially in this kind of year. So. Okay. Okay, thanks, Jesse.
Anytime.
One other point for Roger, in the satisfaction survey, recreation is the one department across the city that literally the trend in the bar graph doesn't have a negative or a statistically significant negative. It's like a 1 or 2% negative rating. So
That survey is
up to you
giving so
guys.
much more data this year than,
mhm.
it's amazing how responsive that's been.
I agree. And like, Alan, what were you saying it
actually.
costs to do it like through, if we had done it through a company,
Like Qualtrics or something.
Qualtrics?
Oh, they cities in Utah County spend $60,000 to $70,000 a year to do their citizen satisfaction survey.
Yeah. And I think, so we have, I don't know, if I mentioned this to you guys, but we're having our interns kind of just summarize that. So we'll share those results with everyone. Okay, we'll move on to updates regarding North Logan's water capital improvement projects. Welcome back.
Just real quick while he's pulling it up, as he mentioned earlier, the well is underway. We had an issue. We have a new rig coming in right now to fix that, to correct the issues that are happening. Well 5 building, they've got some items on order. So we're getting all that stuff lined up. They'll be ready to go as soon as the well's done. Mayor, I don't know if you want to talk about the meeting we had last week.
Sure.
It's exciting, right?
Yeah, so we met with Blakemore, Congressman Blakemore, and he kind of presented to them our water situation. If you remember last year, we made a really great case to the state legislature to get funding. We made like top 5 out of hundreds of projects that had been submitted. And then there was a last minute project that kind of just usurped all of the funding. So we thought we had it. So anyway, we met with Blakemore on Friday, and Jordan and Zach kind of gave a presentation about our current water situation. There's a considerable amount of money. I don't know, 50 billion. Is that what it is?
Something like that.
No, I mean, in the
Yeah.
drought relief fund, not, we asked for
Yeah.
$29 billion.
Fixing everything.
No, we just presented our situation, and Blake was very, very responsive to it. You know,
Glad to hear that.
he was, you know, just talking about how we can make that happen, because there is a drought relief fund that is specific to the Western United States drought conditions. And it's specific to, or at least earmarked for reservoirs, which aren't the same as the reservoirs we're talking about, but they feel like they can fit that into what that money's earmarked for. So really positive news. We're trying to exhaust all avenues of getting these projects funded, because we absolutely need them. And, you know, the more help that we can get, the better. And it really is what that money is set aside for.
Yeah.
You know, so it's really just a matter of, you know, having those kinds of meetings and talking to the right people. And I was really encouraged about that.
Yeah, it was a great
Awesome.
meeting, great opportunity, I think, and hopefully something comes of it. So
Yeah.
we're excited. And the other two, USDA and Division of Drinking Water, we're still working on those, getting them the items back for the PERs and engineering reports. So we'll have those submitted here in the next couple weeks, and hopefully we'll hear back from 3 of these groups pretty quickly.
Okay. Thanks, Jordan, for all your hard work on it.
Thanks.
Any water bragging? No.
Best tasting water in the world.
I do have a comment to make, because I didn't realize this, Alan, and you educated me on this. I don't think it hurts coming out of spring, because we have had a lot of water, to explain to residents that the water that we're using now was 3-4 years ago. Is that 2 years ago? I don't know how, I know we're like years behind on it.
It's just a 2-year lag. So the water we use this year is from 2 years ago, the precipitation that fell.
I don't think it hurts to help people, because I think there's probably the general consensus out there that holy cow, we just got a ton of water, which is great for the groundwater. But I think we still need to be proactive in the approach to, conserving and so forth,
We're going to
That's
have to.
That's a
And I-
fantastic point. The secondary irrigation will be great this year.
Yeah.
Will be fantastic. They see.
'Cause that's
immediate
immediate.
Benefit. Which will be great for North Logan City because we have a large portion of the city on secondary water. However, we can't start announcing too early. And so just getting with Marie, maybe just a reminder to Marie to remind us as you do your mayor's messages, as we look at messages going out to the community, it's never too early in that April, May timeline. We're probably gonna have to remind people that yeah, we'll still not be in fantastic shape water wise as far as culinary water goes. We will be in a couple of years, but right now.
Once we
no.
have storage.
Yep.
And I think it helped. You could start by saying we have a well and we're addressing this, but we get our water from so many feet down and it was beneficial for me. I didn't realize that. I just assumed what we got now was what we were getting, but I think people need to hear that. And when
Yeah.
we're talking to people about it, because you're gonna have people, all these canal people are doing it. Why can't, if
And
we're
let-
worried about transportation up here and of the water and pressure and,
And letting them know that the council and the mayor and the water department have done endless work to address that, but it will be about 2 years before you see. Just ironically, it's not 2 years related to groundwater, 2 years related to installing all this infrastructure before we're more comfortable in the situation we're in.
Yeah, and that may be something for a mayor's message or a council message.
Well, and if it's getting to the, I mean, if we're getting closer, or I don't know, we have a exceedingly dry April, I don't think it would be a bad idea to consider putting on the mailboxes again, a message of like, don't start watering until this point, something like that. Cause I did hear a lot of positive feedback about having the watering schedules on the mailboxes. So
Yeah.
people will know to look for it there.
Yeah,
totally legal to.
I got message in April, so thank you.
Well,
And I've got my
we have your
contact.
if
topic.
you want, I have
Great.
an H2O joke you can even start with.
I got a couple
Okay.
good H2O.
Alan, do you want to give any updates on the Civic Center?
It's on the website, the construction updates go there. Thanks to Emily for pushing for that because that's something we've done in the past, but we neglected to do with this particular project, but that's great. However, the updates are basically, they've got the underground plumbing, basically stubbed over to the building and they're putting the footings in. Every time we say that the weather will improve, we kind of like a mixed bag where we're praying and begging for, precipitation while at the same time not at the location where we're building the city office. You have to be very specific. But yeah, that's that where we're at right now is just basically putting those footings in for that building.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to reports from city officers, etc. We'll start with Scott.
Okay, I just wanted to give you guys just a quick update. A few weeks back, you guys had asked that we take a look at connectivity language and maybe adjusting some of the language we have for new subdivisions and how do we get some of these master plans roads to connect when we have, limited distance caps. So the planning commission is reviewing that in work session tomorrow. We have some draft language, happy to circulate that if you guys would like to look at it, but we'll probably have 1 or 2 work sessions. We need to have it reviewed internally by the fire marshal, just make sure we're on the right line. But then it should be before you the next, couple of weeks down the line. And then we also have an administrative appeal scheduled for next Wednesday. It's an appeal to a land use decision made by the planning commission for a conditional use permit for a detached accessory dwelling unit. A couple weeks back, they had denied a permit and the applicant is appealing that decision. So if you guys would like to attend that meeting, it's next Wednesday at 1 PM in this room. So just FYI.
And I know several planning commissioners are planning on that, so, and I am as
Yeah,
well.
Good learning
so,
opportunity as well for everyone.
Yeah,
What time is that again,
it's at
Scott?
1.
1 PM. Yep, next Wednesday, the 8th.
Okay.
It'll go out with an agenda, just like any other public meeting, but just a heads up.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Scott. All right, Jordan. Okay, Lieutenant Olson. Happy to have you tonight. It's been a while.
Just let you know what kind of calls we took last week. We have 98 total and 44 traffic stops. I don't know how many of those turned out to be citations, but looks like we're about up to 40 to 50% now. We are taking a lot of crashes, so they're pretty time consuming, and we've done a lot of burglary and some pornography stuff. So that's the kind of stuff that our detectives are working on currently.
Are the burglaries, is that cars or is that homes?
So mostly cars, like
Okay.
we call them a smash and grab. So people just drive by and see a laptop or something in the car, and they'll just break the window, take the,
It's
so,
too bad.
but yeah.
Okay, okay, thanks a bunch. Scott? You do have an update. Do you want to just briefly talk about ranked choice voting? This just kind of needs to be on the radar of the council, because I'm going to be asking you guys for some advice on, the direction that we go.
So, we've decided to go ranked choice voting, except that Cache County has said that they're not going to offer ranked choice voting. They're only going to offer traditional. So if we decide to go with ranked choice voting, we would have to go out to another county, and where we're going down to Provo and that area to get a county to do it.
Yeah, so there are 5 counties that currently offer ranked choice voting. And so one thing that we'll probably do in the intervening weeks is just talk to them and see what that looks like. But I know that they do it for other counties. So we need to kind of make this decision, because there's a big educational component to ranked choice voting and kind of removing some of the fears associated with that.
What was the county's reason? Because we have a
Yeah.
part-time person now?
Basically, yeah, I think that is a lot of
The
it.
one over elections is fairly new,
It's a
and
freaking disaster, but I don't know, whatever.
and
Sorry.
they just don't have the staff to run both concurrently.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
State
anyway,
legislature, that get out of committee.
What?
They
No,
tried to ban it.
From
in
my
the state.
understanding, it did
Like,
not get out of committee.
yeah.
I don't think so.
Nope.
So anyway, just think about that, and we can just make a decision in the next little bit about how we approach that. So
Have you spoken to, is this kind of the first step? Have you spoken to any of the counties yet, or even had a conversation of?
Yeah, but the problem we have is, how do we get the ballots
ballots.
to them,
Yeah,
especially
that's
on
what I was-
election night?
Yeah, and the counties are Summit, Tooele, Utah, Salt Lake, and then there's a 5th. It's,
because
Probably
we're
not Utah County.
Super close.
it is Utah.
Is it really Utah County's on? there?
Utah's doing it, yeah. So anyway, we'll, like Scott and I can look into that, but I just wanted you guys to know that
Okay.
that's not happening,
So
so.
it would kind of delay everything probably at least 3 or 4 days after elections.
Yeah, and
Is-
that's.
Is the ranked choice, I forget what they're called, the coalition, offering any type of,
Assistance with that.
I mean, they're so active. I'm surprised they haven't come up with some alternatives or options.
No, because
They haven't offered anything.
Nibley
it's
does
the
ranked choice
counties that
voting,
have to run
correct?
it.
Nibley did do it previously,
I'm curious,
Nibley doesn't plan on doing it this year.
right?
oh, okay.
We might be the only ones if we kept.
Yeah, and
So
that's
our
what-
hands might be tied. I
That's
think.
what makes it hard, is
Yeah.
that, I was kind of looking to other mayors. Hyde Park still does it verbally.
That's kind of
so-
crazy, isn't it?
Yeah,
Okay.
and
Oh, maybe maybe it's a done deal then. So
yeah,
I
so
just-
anyway,
I wish we could go back to the previous method that we did, because it would only cost us about 3,000 a year.
right,
But since we have to do mostly by mail, which is more or less all by mail.
yeah. I know that's the hard thing, is that we're
Hmm.
basically forced to pay. I don't know, is it
Postage.
20,000?
It's 26,000. Goes from 3,000 to 26,000
Yeah,
by the legislature passing that.
so. Anyway, we can talk about it. We can at least flesh out what that would look like and see if, like what the delay would be, and then what the costs or the cost savings would be, but the county is saying no, thanks, so. Okay, thanks, Scott.
Personally, I wouldn't put a lot of time into it. It seems like it's
It's just not gonna
Probably
happen.
Not gonna be feasible,
Okay, well,
in my
that's
opinion, but
good input. All right, who am I missing? I guess we're at Alan.
I'll just run through the events coming up. Fun shot contest going up for Green King High. STEM Fair. This is something the library is putting together at Greenville Elementary on March 13th. They have more information on the website. Princess Royalty Party, Easter egg hunt. These are all just coming up in the next month. Soapbox Derby. This is put together by the same group that does the pumpkin toss. It's the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, ASME, with USU. And they're helping put this together with our Parks Department and our Recreation Department. And then the mid-year conference and then the Royalty Honeybee. So let anyone know if they're interested in signing up for that. The pageant will be on April 22nd. Most likely. I'm hoping that's the date at 5:30.
Did they confirm that they're gonna have that USC professor do the? Okay, perfect. He really truly did make he's hilarious, so. I would very much
Yeah.
recommend going if you didn't go to the pumpkin toss.
If he missed his calling life, if he'd
I
announced for the
know, he is
NFL,
great.
they would just be sold out every game. He was fantastic at every event. But sorry, there's several other events, but I just wanted to go over the ones coming up in the next month and a half. So you just put them on your docket or on your radar. And then if you can, just let people know. And if you use your Facebook accounts, just reshare what Marie shares.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Anything from the council? Okay, then Roger, any comments on the continuation of this meeting?
I move to adjourn.
All right, motion by Betsy,
Second,
second by Emily. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously.
Very succinct tonight to the point. Roger, well done. Lindsay, well done. Emily, not so much.
I don't know. Can you like a rankings 0 to 10?
Well, I can't do ranked choice voting anymore, so now we're in for a drag it out primary.
What could we put?